Yo, what is up, guys? Today I thought I'd give you a little rundown of my mixing process with the title track of my upcoming album. There was a comment right here on my last video of someone asking me for my vocal mixing process because they heard my single that's out now. Link is in the description. So yeah, I'm just thought I'd give you a breakdown of my general mixing process. Let's get into it. So, let's start out with the acoustic guitar I have in this track. Now, I always have a very standard process when it comes to recording my acoustics. I like to use a dynamic microphone, and I like to record stereo layers a lot of the time. But for the intro of this track, I just have one mono acoustic guitar, and on it, I have this plugin, Brit Pre, which is a preamp. So basically, I like it to have a preamp, a compressor, and some EQ. So this is my preamp, Brit Pre by Analog Obsession, which you can get for free. And this basically just boosts the signal and colors it a little bit. Next, we have a compressor, which I'm using UAD LA2A for with the acoustic guitar preset on. And some EQ really to taste. I have it in my preset, but I always tend to change it depending on the position of the guitar and the mic and just the general vibe of the track. So when you have a preset like this, you don't want to just leave the EQ as is, because then all your tracks are going to sound the same and it's going to sound wrong. So let's move on to the vocal mix. So when I record vocals, I like to record one main layer and then some harmonies. Sometimes I'll pan them, but for this track and for a lot of the tracks on my album, I didn't really pan the vocals. I wanted them to be in the center because I have a lot of stereo guitars and it would kind of clash. So having the vocals in the center really focuses it and lets you hear the harmonies really nicely. So we have one layer that sounds like this. Don't you leave me like. And then we have this layer. Don't you leave me like before you. Alright, and here I have my master vocal preset, which I made. I just have an EQ cutting the lows. This I just leave on. I know I said before, don't leave the EQs. But this is just a general purpose. You always want to cut a bit of low end out of your vocals to leave room for bass. But yeah, pretty much the same thing. We got a preamp. We're using Brit Pre again. We're using SPE Comp, also by Analog Obsession. It's a tube compressor. And then we have another compressor because each compressor adds its own sound and characteristic to your audio. So I like having two. Also, it just rounds out the sound a bit. So I have this compressor. I adjust it to whatever level the mic is at. Then I have an EQ, and it really depends on your mic and your voice. And it also depends on the track as well. But this is really a personal thing. I like to dip a little bit of the low mids in my voice when I record. That's just how I like to do it. But also on the vocals, I have a send track going to hybrid reverb, just to keep the reverb signal separate from the main mix. Because otherwise, in Ableton, the stock reverbs, they kind of bring the volume down and it muddies up the sound. So I wanted to have them separated just to have more clarity in the mix. And of course, cutting the low end to leave room for the bass. And something which you can do, which I actually haven't done here, is to get a better bass mix for example, phone speakers. Like if you're listening to the song on TikTok or something, which is how I think a lot of people listen to music these days. On the bass, you're gonna want to find the fundamental harmonic of of the pick attack, right? So, or your fingers, right? And what that'll do is it'll add a bit of punch for your phone speakers. So let's just give this a listen. So I can see over here at around 140 hertz, maybe a bit higher. So it just adds a little bit of punch, and that'll really cut through on a phone speaker. And here we have electric guitar. Look, I don't really like to mess with sounds. If the tone isn't right as you're recording it, then throwing a bunch of EQ and compression isn't really going to fix it. So electric guitar mix, pretty standard. I just have a bit of compressor, just because I was playing a bit too hard in some parts. I wanted to bring that down before the amp, because pushing an amp harder or softer, it creates different sounds. So I wanted to keep that quite consistent. And that's pretty much it. I guess I can show you nothing really going on with the drums, just a bit of compression, you know. I like to keep my mixes fairly simple, and, you know, it may not be that good for professional use, but for my personal use, you know, I'm not going to benefit from having all of these plugins on just to get that little bit of detail that only other engineers are going to look out for. The secret to mixing is trusting your ears and having a sound that you are happy with and that you like. So this is how I achieve that for myself. And if you learned something, that's great. But anyways, guys, see you in the next one.